Waltzing Among the Willows by Aurora Schlosswald. Chapter 2. Wanted for training an accomplice. Eleanor Volpe stared in horror at the dead body floating in the Thames, yet she refused to turn back. The crowded orphanage was all she had ever known in life, and she had resolved to find adventure or die seeking it. What should she do? She could apply to work at a factory, but she dreaded the long hours and cramped conditions. She could go mudlarking or collect leeches, but she was perturbed by the thought of approaching a river that entombed so many lost souls, and being a tosher was out of the question. Perhaps she should offer herself to a wealthy family as their servant, or frighten birds in a farmer's field. As she pondered the matter, she noticed a dapper gentleman. No doubt his pocket held enough coins to feed her for the day, or perhaps a beautiful watch that could be sold for enough money to grant her a night's lodging somewhere. Did she truly have to steal? If she asked politely, would he be gracious enough to help her? She hesitantly approached. As she drew nearer, she noticed the way he scrutinized her every step. "Are you in need of assistance, dear child?" he queried politely. "Please, sir." She lowered her eyes. "I'm rather famished." "Such a silent gait," he commented. "Come now, and we shall dine heartily on roast goose." Eleanor followed him to a stunning mansion. The library alone was far larger than the entire orphanage, and each shelf was filled with books. A deep chair with burgundy cushions with gold trim rested in front of an ornate fireplace, and the chandelier was directly over a rug with intricate designs of various colors. In the corner was a writing desk with several drawers and a wooden chair. Just across the room was a harpsichord with sheet music. The upper level of the library could be reached by a short set of winding stairs, and one of the windows was actually a glass door leading out to a balcony. When they reached the dining room, her host seated himself at the head of a long table, in front of a marble fireplace with a painting a few inches above the mantel. The mantelpiece itself held a small clock, a vase of flowers, and a few candlesticks. A woman approached. Her black hair, which was wound into a tight bun, already showed streaks of gray, but she hid it under her mob cap. "Phoebe, this is our guest," the mansion owner stated. "See that Molly prepares a room for her, and have Patsy purchase some new garments and draw her bath." The maid frowned, but she left to do her employer's bidding. "Do seat yourself, my dear," the man invited. Eleanor sat in the nearest chair, staring in awe at the various delicacies arrayed on the table. "Where are your parents?" "I'm an orphan," she explained. "I was just looking for work." "Search no further, dearest child. I shall make you wealthy." Something seemed wrong. Where was his wife? If he were a compassionate man who wished to assist a child in need, why were there no other children in the mansion? "We shall travel," he continued. "Before you have aged another year, you shall have seen the finest sights in the United Kingdom, and before 5 years have passed, you shall have gained knowledge of all Europe. You shall visit places off limits to the general public, and you shall make the acquaintance of people admired by society." Here was certainly the promise of adventure. Could she truly trust this man? What did she have to lose? "Why do you want me?" she queried. "Your silent gait intrigues me." He sipped his glass of sherry. "I shall teach you to use it properly." Eleanor's new life was beyond her wildest dreams. The mansion owner provided for her every need in lavish comfort, and with her calico kitten in her lap, she traveled to the finest destinations in Europe, enjoying private tours and meeting great thinkers and writers. Rather than attending public school, she met with private tutors, who instructed her in mathematics, science, history, geography, philosophy, literature, foreign languages, and etiquette. Although she enjoyed most lessons, she found grammar to be a bit tedious. "Remember," the tutor droned, "a visitor knocks at the door, but an archer knocks his arrows without the K. Lightning is a form of the verb lighten. Lightning is what we see in the sky during storms. You should have done something, not should have. You can hardly believe what you're hearing, not can't hardly. We ask other people to bear with us, bear. If we use the other spelling, we're committing unspeakable atrocities never mentioned in polite company. A portrait or a crucified victim is hung. A condemned wretch struggling on the gallows is hanged. She nodded, wondering when she would ever need to speak of such a horrific matter. One lies down on a bed, but one lays one's books on the night table. In past tense, I lay down on the bed and laid my books on the table. We do not say that we are going to lay down and rest. After living happily at the mansion for a few years, the day arrived when Eleanor was purchasing herbs from the grocer to season their evening meal. Although the kitchen staff would gladly have run the errand for their boss, Eleanor welcomed the chance to stroll through the city. On her way home, a stranger approached her. "Good afternoon," he greeted cordially. Remembering the story she had heard about a girl in a red hood who endangered her own life by speaking with a wolf who pretended to be polite, Eleanor said nothing. "Are you lost, dear child?" he asked. "May I see you home? The city can be rather dangerous for one so young." She continued walking. "Where do you live?" Without a word, Eleanor darted into the apothecary's shop. The man behind the counter was stocking his shelves, but when he heard the bell over his door ring, he turned to face her. "Good afternoon," he smiled politely. "May I help you?" "There was a man following me," she explained. "He wanted to know where I lived. I didn't trust him. Please, may I stay here until I'm sure he's gone? Then I'll go home." "What did this man look like?" "That's him out the window. He's coming this way." The bell sounded again as the stranger entered the shop, but he didn't even acknowledge the girl. He simply stood behind her as if waiting his turn to speak with the apothecary. "For shame!" the man behind the counter scolded. "What is this business I hear of you frightening children?" "I meant no harm," the stranger responded. "I was simply investigating." "Investigating? What felonies has she committed?" "I suspect her to be a hostage of lions." For several moments, the apothecary muttered under his breath. Eleanor wasn't sure what he was saying, but she sincerely doubted he was whispering the lyrics of a hymn. "Garrison," he began, "I know he's been your nemesis for years, but you have to trust Scotland Yard to do their duty. I'm quite certain—" "Dash it all, man, they'll hang him!" Garrison shook his head. "I know of the atrocities he's committed over the years, but if he would only listen to reason and desist from such felonies at once, his brilliant mind could produce such great advancements in society that life as we know it would be forever changed." The apothecary smiled sadly. "Some men make terrible mistakes and change their ways afterwards, but I'm afraid men like lions never will. Although it pains you to admit as much, you're perfectly aware that you'll never manage to convince him to reform." "What would you have me do? Admit defeat and cease my attempts to assist him in becoming a positive asset to the community? Shall I sit at home and do nothing as I live in dread of the day I read of his arrest in the newspaper? Would you have me stand in front of the gallows as I watch the only friend I've ever had, as dear to me as my own brother, plummet until his neck breaks, or worse, spend several minutes in unspeakable anguish as he struggles in vain for one final inhalation? Must I then be forced to continue my own life with the knowledge that I allowed him to perish in such a wretched manner, and I did nothing to dissuade him from continuing down the path that would inevitably lead to his demise?" "Your friend perished years ago. The man Lyons allowed himself to become utterly despises you, just as you abhor each felony he commits." Eleanor heard no more of the conversation, for she hurried home as fast as she could. "What troubles you, my dear?" the mansion owner queried. She told him about the stranger and his conversation with the apothecary. "Father, your last name is Lyons," she concluded. "Are you a bad man?" Lyons smiled. There's no such thing as good or bad, my dear. It's simply a matter of perspective. Before you fall asleep tonight, I shall tell you a few stories about the notorious outlaw Robin Hood, hailed as a noble hero, beloved by all generations. Are you going to be hanged? I'm perfectly safe. That fool Garrison has no authority to arrest me, and no one involved in law enforcement is clever enough. He embraced her. This beautiful mansion didn't appear by magic. To get what we want in life, we must work for it. And I do believe you're old enough to begin learning the trade. Your silent gait shall be your greatest asset. Although Eleanor continued her education as usual, additional tutors were brought in to help her develop the skills she would need as an adult. These men placed items in their pockets and encouraged her to remove them without being noticed. They took her into the garden and taught her to use weapons. Female tutors were hired to help her learn how to intrigue men without going too far. By the time she was 17 years old, she was a deadly force. At her father's bidding, she could bring him any item in England or in the life of anyone he wished. Not once did the police ever suspect her. One evening, as a cold fog began to settle over the city streets, she was crossing a bridge with Lyons on their way home from watching an opera. She heard someone calling her benefactor's name, and as she turned, she saw Garrison running toward them, his eyes wide with horror. "You must heed my advice," he pleaded. "The police received an anonymous report. I swear on my life I was not the informant, yet they suspect you of various felonies. I urge you to travel, lest you be taken into custody." "No doubt your incessant meddling led them to such conclusions," Lyons retorted. Drawing his dagger, he plunged it between Garrison's shoulders. Garrison sank to his knees in anguish as the red stain grew on his coat. "Why?" His voice quavered as he panted for breath. "Why could we not have maintained our friendship? What harm have I ever done?" "Every time you attempted to dissuade me from my career," Lyons replied, "your efforts drew unwanted attention. I know about the anonymous advice you frequently gave Scotland Yard concerning my men, many of whom are in prison as we speak." "Never in the history of England has there ever been a felon more cunning or brutal than yourself, nor shall any future crimes surpass yours. Your notoriety has spread throughout Europe. The base toast you as the pinnacle of success, and none dare doubt your capability of ingenious iniquity. Yet, what have you gained by committing such misdeeds?" "More than you'll ever know," he sighed wearily. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it had to end this way. I, too, have missed my dear friend." An officer approached and ordered Lyons to throw down the dagger. Before the criminal mastermind could flee, 3 other officers appeared, surrounding him. "Followed Garrison right to me, did you?" Lyons clicked his tongue. "Such a pity. No matter how many years a man lives, when the day of his death arrives, he feels his time has been too short, and he must bid farewell far sooner than he realized. Now we shall see if Garrison and I shall be granted another chance to rekindle our friendship in the afterlife, or if we must go our separate ways." Before anyone could stop him, he drew his gun and turned it toward himself. Pulling the trigger, he fell instantly. Despite his own injury, Garrison crawled toward Lyons, struggling in vain to tend his friend's wound. "Miss, did you see what happened?" the officer queried. "I saw this man lying here," Eleanor stated, "and I approached to ask if he needed medical assistance. Then I heard him quarreling with this other gentleman, and that's when you arrived." "Do you need a physician, sir?" Garrison shook his head. "Never have I placed myself in a doctor's care. That's how I manage To live so long. Eleanor felt numb as she watched the scene unfold. Nothing seemed real. In a way, she reasoned that she should be sorrowful, for Lyons had granted her a life of luxury. On the other hand, she believed she should be angry, for he had made her his personal accomplice, and now that he had perished, what was to become of her? However, she felt no emotion whatsoever, and she expected to awaken any moment from this unfolding nightmare. "Did you hear me?" the officer asked. "I'm sorry, sir," she responded demurely. "It's rather difficult to concentrate at the moment, and I was unaware you had spoken to me. May I return home and sip some tea? After a good night's sleep, I shall visit the station at once and answer all the questions posed by the honorable citizens who uphold and enforce the law." He nodded. As Eleanor turned to leave, she noted that Garrison's unblinking eyes had taken on a glassy appearance. In the dim light, she thought she could see a few tears on his face, and she wondered if it was from his emotional turmoil or his physical pain. To her astonishment, Lyons wore the same facial expression, causing her to wonder if the two friends were indeed reunited in death, or if they had truly been separated forever.